Ingrid had been struggling with finding any motivation for years now. All she did all day was lay on her couch, eating and relaxing, growing unhealthier by the day. Something had to change, but she knew she could not stick to something drastic. Eventually, she decided to just try and walk for 1 hour every day. And the results exceeded even her wildest expectations. What the hell could walking just 1 hour a day do for somebody in her life-threatening situation? Ingrid could still remember herself thinking that. She also remembers how incredibly difficult it had been for her those first couple of weeks, but she managed to stick with it. With weeks passing, everything did seem to start going easier and easier. Eventually, Ingrid even got to the point where she was able to walk the whole hour without having to rest. This made Ingrid very content, and then she did not even know yet the massive change all this was making for her. It took until her next doctor visit for her to find out. And when he gave her the news, Ingrid could barely believe it. And all this just because she started walking just 1 hour every day. But what was this massive change Ingrid experienced? How could it have possibly happened with just daily walking, and could this also work for you? But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Ingrid's story is one of a lot of downs, especially in recent years, but also one of hope as she managed to completely change her dire situation around for the better when she started putting in the right kind of effort. And you could do this too. Ingrid's health had been slowly going downhill for a long time. She had really unhealthy eating habits, was unmotivated to undertake anything, and was mostly spending her time alone in the house glued to the couch watching TV. But she knew this was not sustainable. Her 2 children had left the house a while ago now as they were sick and tired of having to take care of their mother. Her ex-husband had the same idea, but a lot sooner. Ingrid had thus been alone for a while now, only having some loyal friends on who she could still count. But even these friendships were being pushed to the limit. They always had to come to visit Ingrid if they wanted to see her, cause she could not or didn't want to go there or go out to any other places. It was just all too difficult for Ingrid, and her friends were getting sick and tired of this. With all this happening to her, you would expect that trying to get better and improving oneself would be a no-brainer for Ingrid. She did not want to lose everybody that cared about her, right? And you are correct in this assumption, but it is just not that simple. It was necessary for Ingrid to lose the weight, both for making the procedure as safe as possible, and to make sure Ingrid was actually able to control her urges enough to lose the required weight. Ingrid could hardly believe what the doctor was saying. She had not come across any of that in her research. The doctor explained again. Ingrid losing the weight at the beginning would give the doctor the assurance that she would have what it takes to stick with a diet after gastric bypass. Ingrid understood what the doctor was saying, but unfortunately, now she was back to square one. Ingrid wanted to get angry with the specialist because the more she thought about it, the more she found the proposition unreasonable. If she was able to lose weight on her own without medical help, she wouldn't have needed to book an appointment with the specialist in the first place. Ingrid left the doctor's office, telling the specialist that she would try her best, but she already knew that this was not what she was planning to do. Instead, she found another gastric bypass specialist and made an appointment with him. Surely she could find someone who would do the surgery. Her hopes that one of the gastric bypass specialists would be willing to do the procedure without her losing the weight first were largely in vain. She visited many doctors, but time after time she left disappointed. There seemed to be no way around the fact that she needed to lose at least some of the weight on her own. To get the surgery she desperately needs, Ingrid would need to lose a good amount of weight. Understandably, she was distraught by this. She really felt like she was back at the beginning with absolutely no feasible solutions. However, time is really starting to tick regarding her health. Recently, Ingrid suffered from a minor heart attack, which the doctor attributed to her being severely overweight. This was the first time Ingrid was faced with a life-threatening consequence of her weight. However, she also did not want to repeat the incident. It was costly both with time and money. Before the heart attack, Ingrid's weight had only been a series of mostly minor inconveniences like having a hard time walking long distances, and a few major ones like not being able to ride her favorite rides at theme parks anymore. But surviving the heart attack made her realize she needed to do something. Ingrid realized that she wanted to live, and now her weight was a serious obstacle for that. But without the promise of gastric bypass, what was she supposed to do? She really felt like she had exhausted all of her options with those many surgeons who had turned her down without her being willing to lose some of the weight on her own. Surgery was clearly not an option, at least, not until she lost some weight first. But Ingrid just knew that exercise and dieting was something she would never be able to stick with. It had never worked before. Why would it work now? However, an answer to her problem came from an unexpected place, an old friend of hers. Ingrid had planned to meet up with a friend she had not seen in a while to cheer her up in the wake of all the bad news. She knew this friend had always been in similar physical shape as she was, so she hoped her friend would be able to give her some hope about her own life again. Her friend's name was Delilah, and she had been one of Ingrid's closest friends over the years until she moved out of town. It had been about 2 years since then, and the two hadn't seen each other since that time. Ingrid felt a little uncertain about meeting again after all this time, but she was excited too. She had no idea what was going to happen. As Ingrid walked up the driveway, she kept looking all around her in surprise. Things looked a whole lot different than what she would have expected. Delilah had always had a decent income, but closer to average than high class, and this was definitely high class. What had happened in the last 2 years? The house she was walking up to looked massive, and the car in the driveway was pretty spectacular too. In fact, everything she saw around her looked extremely high-end and well cared for. It didn't look anything like what she remembered of Delilah, and she wondered what it meant as she rang the doorbell. But she was in for a bigger shock. The woman standing in front of her couldn't possibly be Delilah, could it? This woman didn't look anything like her. She was so skinny that it was impossible to believe she could be the woman that Ingrid remembered, especially given that it had only been 2 years since they'd seen each other. The woman couldn't possibly have changed that much so quickly, right? But the woman seemed to know her and said she was Delilah, and she invited Ingrid in. The two began talking about weight loss. They also had some coffee and cake, which she was surprised to notice Delilah was partaking in too. In fact, she was pretty sure the piece of cake that Delilah had taken for herself was even larger than her own. So what was the big secret? How was Delilah so skinny when she was eating cake and drinking coffee? She explained that it had started with a single simple change. She had started walking every day for just a single hour. Ingrid's jaw dropped. There was no way that she could believe that. Could Delilah really have made such a huge difference in her weight from that one simple thing? But Delilah insisted that it was true. In fact, she told Ingrid that it was the only thing that she was comfortable to do at the weight she was when she started, and that anything else she tried was just too painful long before it was going to do any good for her. But could that really have allowed her to drop so much weight? According to Delilah, the walking was brutal at first. She absolutely hated it, but she kept at it anyway. And as she kept at it, she started seeing improvements. It was not just about losing weight either. She was seeing improvements in all different areas of her life by taking up walking and sticking to it. Was this really the answer? That day, Ingrid left feeling like a changed person. In fact, for the first time she felt like she had hope. According to the doctor, she practically had a death sentence. But with what Delilah had said, she just might be able to change that. She might be able to save her own life and make a big change, if she could pull it off. She decided to start doing what Delilah had said right away. So the next day she bought a new pair of walking shoes and set out. She figured an hour couldn't be too difficult. If Delilah could do it then, she could do it. How hard could it really be? But she was out of shape, and she had overestimated her abilities and underestimated the difficulty of walking for an entire hour. For someone her size, it might have been an hour of mountain climbing. She was exhausted and worn out, and it had only been about 10 minutes. How was she going to manage this for an hour? That was all it took for her to really feel defeated. After all, this had been her one last chance. This was her last hope, and all she wanted to do was go home and curl up on the couch to watch TV until the end of her days. According to the doctor, that wouldn't be too much longer, and there was nothing else she could do after all, right? But as Ingrid thought about giving up and throwing in the towel, she thought of all the people who would be disappointed. Her husband, her children, her family. Delilah. Even the doctor who had tried so desperately to help her. Somehow she had to make this work. She just didn't know how she was going to do it. She kept pushing and managed to get herself to 30 minutes that first day. It was only half of what she had hoped for, but it was 3 times what she had thought she could accomplish after she got started. She was a little disappointed, but she was also glad she hadn't given up right at the beginning. But would she be able to do it again? Over the next couple days, she could barely move. Her legs and her lower back were in pain from the exercise, and she was again stuck on the couch. But this time she made a big change. She didn't eat whatever she wanted while she was confined to the couch. She ate less and she ate healthier. But would that change be enough? Instead of eating bags of chips or pieces of chocolate, she ate ready-made salads she had prepared the day before and fruits. It was definitely not what she wanted when she took the first one in place of a bag of chips, but she pushed on anyway. And she found that she didn't actually mind the taste, but this wasn't going to cut it alone. When she finally felt up to it again, she jumped right into walking. She was determined to keep going and not give up because it had been hard that time. She was surprised that she felt a whole lot better this time around. And even though she was exhausted and sore, she was able to make it the entire hour. It was the first time she'd walked for an hour and she felt so proud of herself. Now it was a matter of keeping it up. Over the next few months, her condition started to improve. In fact, it improved so much that walking became jogging, and then she was able to do other exercises entirely. She began to jump into the new workout plan and do everything that she could. She wasn't going to back down from this challenge, not when she was finally starting to get somewhere. It was going to be hard, though. Ingrid was losing weight at a staggering speed, and as her weight started to plateau, she was told that she had made herself a perfect candidate for gastric bypass. Just like Delilah had predicted, things were working out really well. She was going to manage this, and she was going to save her life. And that wasn't the only thing that improved. Ingrid's husband came back, glad that she was finally willing to put in the work for herself. And with him came the children that Ingrid had missed so much. Just having them all back was enough to push Ingrid to keep going. She wasn't going to fail now that she was getting so close to the finish line, but it was still not going to be easy. The support of her family helped her with the gastric bypass. It was a huge success, but it required her to stick with a good diet and exercise schedule even after the surgery. She was determined to do it because she wanted to get her life back. She wanted to enjoy her life with her children, and now, she thought, she just might be able to. Looking back, she was stunned that all of this had been made possible by just getting out there and walking for a single hour every day. It wasn't a magic trick, but it was a great start. It was simple, or at least it was a simple thing to ask, though definitely not simple for her to execute at first. That 1 hour was something that she could achieve even though it took a bit of time. It was something that anyone could do. And it was something that pushed her to make additional changes. One small step at a time, she had not only walked that hour, but had continued to do other things that helped her reach her goals. Walking a single hour a day had saved Ingrid's life. And while that might not be the same situation that everyone finds themselves in, it can definitely make a difference in your life to just dedicate a single hour of your time. Take a walk for an hour every day. Make that positive change and see just what could happen if you try. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscription, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming stories.